Joining me this week is a really, really cool content creator. You've probably heard of him, but if you haven't, I'm glad to introduce you. His name is Prophet of Zod. Prophet of Zod, what's going on tonight?
I am on your show. That is going on so far.
Yep, that's a fact. Let's get down to brass tacks. Absolutely.
Very excited to be here and finally do something with you after all this time. So yeah.
Yeah, and so Zod, you and I first met 2 years ago at Faithless Forum 2018, and I remember you and Cirrus were like the two content creators there that I didn't know who you guys were. I think a lot more people knew who you were. I just personally did not know. You sure as hell didn't know who I was. So yeah,
actually not a lot of people knew who I was that time around.
Which is crazy because you came from Alaska to Texas to this conference. And like, not as many, that's just amazing. It was really, really cool to meet you then. And then we got to hang out last year, which was cool. But yeah, like you've been doing YouTube for a little bit now. You cover like really a couple different topics. Why don't you explain the channel for those who aren't familiar with you?
Yeah, essentially, I'm another atheist YouTube channel, I guess. I do content mostly targeted at people who are already doubting or starting not to believe or whatever, just helping them come to terms with their lack of belief and kind of finding their footing as they make their way out of the faith. So I do that through sometimes response videos, sometimes just generally talking about topics related to religion and lack of belief. Sometimes I do silly cartoons. Those have gotten a little more sparse. So
yeah, and what I like, yeah, absolutely. What I like about your content too is you're an ex-Christian like I am, and the way that you kind of frame your videos, and not all of them, but in a lot of them, is in the context of a Christian who might be doubting would be watching this, right? And like kind of walking through what the step-by-step process would be, because sometimes it's easy to just like put out like, okay, here's the argument, listen to this and you should be good. But like, that's just not how people respond to things. A lot of times they sometimes respond to narrative, or they kind of need to be walked through step by step on why something makes sense. I think you do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think just presenting arguments is really the core thing. I think what I try to focus on, and I think what really helps people, is introspecting on what it's like to come out of faith, what kinds of things you feel inside when you do, what kind of mental gymnastics you go through, or what kind of struggles you go through with people around you. I think that's really something people need to hear when they're finding their footing as a non-believer and trying to figure out who they are and how they relate to their former families and stuff like that. So,
yeah. And speaking of that, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about your journey in the sense of how you relate to your family, because a question I get a lot from people is, how do I talk to family about this? Because it's different from just talking to, somebody you don't know, and somebody that you do know is they kind of know your history. They know, and depending on the actual religious sect too, there could be extra boundaries and extra kind of hurdles you have to go through. But I was wondering, like, could you share your experience a little bit with how you dealt with that and how you work with your family now?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is, with your family, talk about it very little for the most part, if they're still believers. I found the time and way to kind of come out to most of my family members. Most of them were not surprised by the time I said anything. But really give them the chance to approach you and ask you questions, or give it the opportunity to come up in conversation. Hopefully those in your life will be constructive and kind in how they do that. And if they do, you can just kind of follow their lead and let the conversation go where it will, and make sure you don't push them too far outside their comfort zone, in my opinion. But one of the biggest things I think you can do as a non-believer that will have an impact on Christians is just be there and be a good, kind person, and don't always be pushing atheism. Don't be mean about it. That just really feeds into a narrative that they're already getting at church, and is just going to reinforce whatever helps them entrench against non-believers.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like, this is like, for me, maybe you shared this experience too. Becoming an atheist was kind of getting a new identity for myself. Like, I super identified as a Christian, and then kind of, you swung between labels for a bit, and then finally saying out loud, like, oh, I am an atheist. Like, that's a difference not only in how I relate to other people, but how other people are going to relate to me, because that label is a signifier for them. Yeah. Like, oh, this is how you should interpret people in a certain way. And if you don't meet those expectations, that's great, because, hey, whoa, this thing I'm hearing about at church, but this doesn't match up with this person that I know, you know. And I think that's how we can kind of change people's expectations, that through first, you know, first encounters with experience of people. I think one comparison I like to make for folks to understand is, like, the LGBT movement really, when it started to go mainstream a lot more, I think a lot of people, if you cite, you know, why they changed, they'll say, well, I had a friend who came out to me as gay, you know, or I knew someone that came out as gay, and they started to become more open-minded to that, because suddenly it wasn't just, you know, a person they saw on TV or a character they saw, you know, in a movie or something. This was a real life human being that had, you know, value in their lives. And so I encourage people to come out when they can, but there's definitely limits. Like, I don't want people to come out if it's not safe, or, you know, if it's going to be super detrimental. But, like, even though it's going to be hard, I think it's worth it in the long run. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think first off, coming out, you have to be very careful about. And one thing I'll always tell people if they come to me for advice is be very careful about how and when you do it, because you can never take it back once you start to. And it's going to affect your relationship with a lot of people. And you need to really make sure that you're in a position, safety-wise, all the connections you need that provide for you and help you. You need to make sure that you're ready to sever that, or that you're not going to sever it necessarily, and that you're not going to harm your relationships with people in your life too badly. I think it's important to be who you are, but you need to weigh that against what this is going to do to people in your life who you care about. So I would always tell people, be cautious, feel your way through it. Try to find advice from people you trust who are non-believers. And just it depends so much on the person, the situation. You know, I have a lot of family who is very caring, and it really hasn't impacted my relationship with them that much. I have a lot of people more on the periphery of people I'd grown up with, who you've probably all heard it before, but they like to come at you with either harsh comments. You know, I've literally been called the Antichrist. People just love to tell you what you believe as an atheist. You think the universe came from nothing. You think there's no basis for morality, and they won't hear you tell them that that's not the case, and they'll not hear you articulate what you actually believe.
Yeah.
And some of those people, you just kind of have to let that conversation fall by the wayside and decide whether that relationship is worth maintaining.
Yeah, you just get put in a box. And isn't it interesting that, you know, we're worried about other people's comfort for us being our most authentic selves? Like, how awful is that? That somebody, if somebody came out to me and said, Dan, I'm actually Muslim. Okay, like, I don't give a shit. You know, it's like, I mean, obviously I care about them, right? I care about their journey and where they're going through, but I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, I can't talk to you anymore because, you know, the Bible says I can't, or something. I don't know. Like, but, you know, and just expressing disbelief in something, and just expressing, hey, I don't use this identifier anymore. Like, suddenly that's the big one. Like, that is what makes people the most uncomfortable when it comes to, you know, religious stuff. I think a switch in religious belief also probably has that effect, but for some reason the disbelief is the real kicker for a lot of people.
It almost feels like this is a weird, bizarre Star Trek alien world where so many people believe in an invisible spirit being that just simply not believing that casts you in this weird light. Just that there's actually a word, atheist, for people who don't believe, and they're put in a special category. And then people have these reactions to them. To me, that's one of those things that took me time to really understand how weird that is. But when you pull yourself far enough out of the cultural context of our society just accepting Christianity as a given, or some kind of religion as a given, you recognize that's just extremely, extremely strange, but it's something you have to contend with. And yeah, like you said, we have to accommodate people's feelings a lot. I honestly talk to young people, including one of my children who's an adult now, about the fact that yes, Christians are going to be saying pushy things on Facebook or just in social conversations a lot. And you can't say anything near the equivalent of that, or else it's going to be perceived like this. Is that fair and right? No, but it's the world we live in. And to some extent, and this might sound wrong to say, but we have to navigate that in a way that understands the climate we live in.
It's literally damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yeah. It's like, you know, if you speak out, right, oh, suddenly you're the atheist stereotype of the guy who likes to get in arguments and fight with people. But if you don't say anything, then you're invisible and your voice doesn't matter and your opinion doesn't exist as far as most people are concerned. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in the same camp. You do have to pick your battles, but more and more every day, Zod, I'm just like, you know what? Just kind of, just fuck it. Just like let your freak flag fly. You know, like this isn't about other people. It isn't about other people. It's about my journey and about how I got here. And if somebody else isn't okay with that, that is honestly their problem. You know, if somebody wants to tell me their Christian story again, or their Muslim story, that's cool. I will respect and listen to that, and I will engage with them. But like, I should be able to do that too. I should be able. If someone says, "Let me tell you how I met Jesus," be like, "Oh, cool. Let me tell you when I didn't." But yeah, that you're and this. I was just gonna say too. This is an American context as well. I think if you go to other countries like the UK and Australia, they probably can't relate. I think if you came out as atheist, a lot of them would just be like, "Okay." But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, that's how you interact with the people around you is also part of your personal journey, in my opinion. I'm not saying anything that you really should or shouldn't do. I don't think we should be beholden to Christians to lay down like sheep and let them trot all over us. And I think that is a huge disparity. What they expect from us in conversation versus what they allow of themselves is totally unfair. There's no question about that. So how you in your personal life choose to engage and what battles you choose to pick and what you want to make of your relationship with the people around you who still are Christian or have some regard for Christianity, I think that's just part of your personal growth and experience. And I think we all just need to very carefully find our way through that in light of what it means for us in our journey and our relationships with people.
Yeah, and to say all that is also to say there are better ways to do it than others. Like you can, and I'm not saying don't be diplomatic. I'm not saying just tear down everything you see on site as soon as you come out. But like, do it in a way, I think, because like your first time coming out, that's going to impact people who've never seen that before. Who don't have that experience, and so they're going to judge other atheists based on what they think of you and if they think that your reasoning is valid. And that's not fair. That's not fair for you to be, the reason for people. People shouldn't be given that role, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. And so I like to remind people that, hey, unfortunately, you are kind of an ambassador for atheism because you might be the only person they know who's openly atheist. And that's just, your conversations with them are going to affect how they treat atheists from the future. And in order for us to grow as a community, we really do have to, keep talking about it with people, keep being as respectfully open-minded, yet also, tactfully firm in our positions, confident in ourselves, not conceding too much ground, right? And being sure of who we are. And that's a balance. And I'm still figuring out that balance. I think everybody is, but something good to do, right?
Yeah. And I don't mean to downplay that there are objectively better and worse ways to handle it. I'm not saying that that's not the case. But it just depends so much on the situation. And we do have a certain responsibility to other non-believers to identify strongly enough that they feel emboldened and to be an example and to be out there for them. And that's why I like to normalize the word atheism, for example.
Yes.
It has a certain feel to people's ears, but we need to be out there, show that we are just normal, regular people, and just let that word lose its meaning. And hopefully we'll live in a society where that word's unnecessary, because it's weird that the word exists, in my opinion.
Yeah, it would just be the norm, but we have 4 calls in the queue right now, and all of them are really, really interesting to me, and I'm excited. Of course, you can call the number on screen if you want to call into the show.